Well, folks, good evening. I've been invited to present a brief introduction to WinLink. This will be not a technical discussion, just more of an introductory version of it. WinLink is a communications tool, primarily in emergency situations is when it's designed for, but it can actually be used in other situations as well. Firstly, I want to thank Joe Weder and Dann St-Pierre, two amateurs from Alberta who have the initial presentation that was up on one of the sharing sites that I use as part of my work for the WinLink presentation that I'm working on for RAC, along with other people, not just me. So they've done a presentation. I've added some local flavor to it, and essentially this is what you're going to see. And it won't be long. It'll be 10 or 15 minutes perhaps, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. Now I just need to find a way to advance this thing. There we go. Now, I'm one of those people that I've watched a lot of PowerPoint presentations, and I've done a lot of PowerPoint presentations, and you'll see from this one that I don't read what's on the screen. I just talk about other things because I have a fairly sound presumption that you all are able to read for yourselves. So I'm not going to just sit here and read it and drive you crazy. Also, a copy of this presentation will be shared to Malcolm and Brent and et al. If you want to put it up somewhere, or the recording of this up somewhere on our groups.io or in the Slack channel, I have no hesitation or reservation about that whatsoever. So I'll carry on with those presumptions made. WinLink basically is an email system. It's as simple as that. It looks like email, it behaves like email, and most of it is familiar to practically everybody these days, particularly our clients in government departments and public service agencies who use email in the run of their daily business. As you will see, WinLink is actually better than regular email because WinLink has a redundant transport system, which I will try to describe here shortly. Whereas regular email these days that we all use typically expects that the internet is always there. It's always running due to DSL or fiber or whatever we're using. In the case of WinLink, it realizes that you don't always have a constant connection to the internet or to whatever else you're going to use to transport your message. So WinLink functions a lot the same way as dial-up used to work, where you might work offline for an hour or two, build up a bunch of messages in your outbox, and then connect using your dial-up system, send and receive everything, and then disconnect. So you're not being billed too much for your online time. That's really how WinLink works these days. Connections to WinLink or that WinLink uses to the outside world can be on the internet itself or via RF. And the WinLink email servers, if you want to call them that, are distributed strategically so that their redundancy is something that we can take advantage of, especially when conditions are poor. So the CMS server locations are, as you'll see in a map, they're pretty well all around the world, and they all talk to each other and they share information constantly. And each one of them has a copy of everything. So it's very redundant that way. Okay, the actual software that we use in WinLink is called WinLink Express. And by the way, the word WinLink, the Win part, actually means Windows. And this was invented a little over 20 years ago as a system that would function primarily with Windows. You're not totally out of the game if you're not a Windows person. If you're a Mac user or a Linux or Unix person, there are ways to get involved in this as well, using a slightly different software, but it all ends up being the same at the end. So I'm sure you will find your way to get there. WinLink was developed by amateurs. We're not stealing or co-opting someone else's technology necessarily. Hams did this, and Hams did it for the ham radio community in mind. My particular identity on WinLink is VY2HF. That's it. Because call signs, as we all know, are unique for every one station all around the world. Because of the prefix system and the license allocation system, there can be no more than one call sign for any purpose. So I have two call signs, but they're both mine. And no one else has the call signs that I have. An email addressed to somebody within the WinLink system only needs to use the alias VY2HF. So if you're writing me from within WinLink, all you need to do is put VY2HF in there. The rest is presumed, and the message will find me. But if you're outside the WinLink system and you're in the regular email world, where ordinary people are, you would just write VY2HF winlink.org, and it will find me through the WinLink system that way. So there's a nice border between WinLink world and regular world where there's an interface that allows messages to go back and forth between them, which is a key advantage, I think, for WinLink again. To get an email address in WinLink, you download the software, which I won't be doing tonight. You set up this, it's free. You set it up, you put in your identity information, you register, and then the WinLink servers go on somewhere with your licensing authority or QRZ or somewhere, and they make sure that you are you and that you do have a valid call sign, and bang, you're in the WinLink world from that point forward. So why we're going more so to WinLink and why it's becoming a topic of discussion so much more these days is because it's being officially blessed by the ARRL and their ARES emergency service, as well as RAC and our emergency services that are doing all they can to try to get WinLink adopted and accepted in more parts of Canada and in more government departments around Canada as well. WinLink is especially valuable because it doesn't rely on the regular internet. And we broadcast to anyone who will listen that one of the things we do in exchange for having our license allocations in the radio space is that we provide emergency communications when everything goes down the pooper. And we have to be able to do that even if the internet is down. And we have seen that happen a few times in the past where a cable's been cut by a backhoe and the redundant system fails at the same time and there's no internet. So we need to be able to function and be providing services when those things happen, and WinLink is one of the key ways we can do that. The other thing about WinLink is that if you want to use it in a non-emergency basis, which is 99% of the time, we're not in an emergency posture, we can use WinLink right now to exchange messages among ourselves. In fact, the president of the Charlottetown Club, Bill, VY2 Whiskey Mike, he now uses WinLink intentionally as his method of distributing information to the club membership about meetings and events and things like that. So, and he even says in his message, I sent this using WinLink, just to remind us each time that we could do the same. So WinLink is very much resembling a traditional email client. If you were on the internet 20 or 25 years ago in its infancy, you might have used Eudora or some other type of email application. This will look a lot like that. It's not super fancy, but it does the trick. You'll have a message window like you see on the screen. You will have the ability to type in someone's address, a subject line, body text. You can even send attachments, actually, although we're not going to get into that today. And then there's you can see, I don't know if you can see my mouse or not as I do this. Can anyone see my mouse as I'm doing this?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
Cool. So you can post to the outbox, and then it'll sit there until you decide what you want to do with it later with your connection. Then, once your outbox has been populated with the message, you would then open a session. And opening the session is where you choose how you want WinLink to connect to the WinLink servers out there in the big world. So you type your message text in, you post it, then you make the conscious decision when you want to connect. WinLink Express, when you want to make a connection, you have a choice. If you look down in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, you'll see you have various ways of transporting your message to the outside world, and the program provides you with the opportunity to select from one of those, pick the one you like, and click on it, and then WinLink will then do what it needs to do to get that particular connection going. The Telnet one you see at the very top of the list is just regular internet. We don't manually use Telnet much these days, but a lot of us probably use Telnet, whether we know it or not. If you're on a DX packet cluster of or a Telnet cluster, it's probably using Telnet transport in some way in the back end. So it's there. And there's also things like packet modems, because WinLink does go with VHF as well as HF. So you can use a traditional packet type equipment, and you just talk to it, and away it goes. PACTOR is also available for those of you who have enough deep enough pockets to buy that equipment, but it is also an option when you want to send a WinLink message if you have that. And the one you're going to hear mostly referred to these days, if you explore WinLink a little further, is a thing called VERA. I don't know what VERA actually stands for. It's VARA. It was invented by some chap in Europe, and he has provided it for use The free version of Vera works up to a certain bit rate, and then if you pay extra, it's about $60 US, I think, you can get the fancy version with no speed limit on it. Well, there's a speed limit, but it's not fixed by him, at least. So Vera works both on HF and on VHF as well, and it is the preferred way of sending messages these days. So I mentioned earlier that it was a lot like dial-up, and basically here it is. This is just a clunky graphic I did myself. In this case, you running WinLink Express at the top of the tree there, then you write your email, you throw it into the outbox, and then you decide when you want to connect. Either you take the option on the left, which is Telnet, which is really fast because it's a good internet connection, or you choose the box on the right, which is using the RF spectrum somehow to do that, and then your various choices that you make are underneath that. So you would select from one of these transport type systems to actually get the WinLink message out there into the big world. If you're back at your mode and you've opened up a session, the connection happens in a separate box that you see here. Once you've said open session, this is the box that appears. When you click start, then you will actually see a text scroll of the various processes that are taking place in the background. So it will start the session, it will talk to the radio, and it will be ready to go and connect to the remote node that you're trying to send your message through. So you can do point-to-point or peer-to-peer, as they call it, or you can just connect to a local facility as long as it's able to accept WinLink type connections in the same protocol that you want to use. You click the start little menu at the top and just things start happening magically. I've gone back a couple of months and just given you a shot of my WinLink screen that I had at that time, and now it looks the same except it's got more messages in it. But you'll see that it's a regular looking email program in every way. You've got all your different mailboxes, including your inbox and your outbox. You've got a list of all your messages. Those with attachments have the little paper clip, and you can see which ones you've opened and which ones you've read. And of course, there's a scroll bar down the side where you can go up and down and review all of those messages. So the WinLink connection is very basic. For anyone who's ever run a packet station before or runs one now, and I know there's a few on here who do, you've got your computer, it's plugged into a TNC, like a KPC3, for instance, and then that goes into your radio. These connections are going to be probably different for everybody, but they'll all be roughly the same. Computer, modem of some kind, radio. These days now, with fancier radios, they'll accept a connection from the computer directly through a USB cable, universal serial bus, not upper sideband, USB cable, that will use the sound card in the computer to make these noises and to interpret the noises. And it'll go through a software window like that one you see at the bottom, which is the Vera application window. If it's on HF, it's not a whole lot different. You've got a laptop or a regular desktop computer connected either to your radio, which will be sporting an internal sound card that you can leverage, or you will use a rig blaster or a signal link or a TNC type thing to control or to talk to the rig that way. And in both cases, the radios are connected to HF, and away it goes. The cool thing about WinLink is you might be sitting there saying, well, how do I know where to go? Where in the band do I go? What are the frequencies? WinLink keeps a constant rolling update of who's on the air, what kind of propagation you would have to any of those locations, and which bands or which frequencies might be the best ones to try. In the case of us here in Atlantic Canada, if we want to work a local station in Nova Scotia, let's say, or Newfoundland, or even New England, it's probably going to suggest that we hang out in the 80 or 40 meter band. If we want to go farther, it'll give us higher bands in the HF spectrum. And what WinLink does, it will do an assessment of the possible paths that you might have and the grid square that those other stations are in. When you registered your WinLink program in the first place, you input in your own grid square, so it knows where you are, and now it's figuring out the best propagation path to those other stations. And of course, it's HF, so HF isn't perfect. Some days are good and some days are not, and you have to fiddle with it, just like you always used to have to. So this doesn't solve propagation problems for sure. But the software is pretty persistent, and it'll do all it can to make connections whenever it can. Around North America, there's, as you can see, lots, mostly so far in the United States, although there are some stations in Canada. One of the premier stations, excuse me, is actually not very far from us, and I'll talk about his in just a moment. And you can see there's also a good distribution of stations in Europe and a few other places around the world. The way the WinLink architecture works is that we're all at the bottom here. We have our computers and our radios hooked up to antennas, and we connect to our local node, wherever that might be, whether it's a packet station nearby or a VY2HF or RDOP-HF station that's within a few hundred miles, let's say. And then we would connect with that station, we would exchange our inbox and outbox stuff, and then the station would pick that up, send it over the internet to one of many CMS or common message servers. And they're distributed around the world, including one in Eastern Canada and a couple in the States and one in Europe and one down under. And those servers talk to each other constantly all the time. They're actually on the Amazon Web Service. So unless Amazon goes down like it did last week for a half a day or so, we're in pretty good state. We're in pretty good shape. As you can see, one of our closest, probably our closest station is the one operated by Victor Echo 1 Yankee Zulu. That's Neil Hughes, and he's in the Halifax area. And if you look at the tabs at the top, if you click on just on the WinLink HF webpage, you'll see that each station demonstrates which bands that they're operating on at any one time. In the case of Neil, he's on 80, 60, 40, 30, 20, and 17. And you can choose which of those bands you wish to talk to that station on or try to connect to him on. And then hopefully your message will be passed successfully. So that's the beauty of WinLink. You don't have to do a lot of figuring out. If you just double click on Neil's station in the software, it'll find the frequency, set it up, and the minute you click start, it'll attempt to make a connection with him. Now this is going to be a bit of an experiment here. This is the end of my presentation. But if you're on HF sometime and you hear the following, you're actually listening to VARA, which is one of the WinLink protocols. So please let me know if you can hear this. It's quite brief. It's only maybe 10 seconds long or so. If I can get it going here. Did you guys all hear that? Because I didn't in my headphones.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Well, that's lucky. All right. So essentially, gentlemen, that is my very quick WinLink primer. Again, it wasn't technical. It really is to try to socialize the concept of WinLink being basically an email program that allows you to use RF to send and receive that email, both to other WinLink users and also to the outside internet. So it has lots of applications. The sky is really the limit for that. So that's the upshot, guys. If there's any questions, I'll try. I'm no expert, but I have made successful WinLink connections myself, including as far away as Illinois, and messages have transported properly. So.
How many people have tried WinLink? Show of hands, maybe. I haven't, but Brent has. Anybody else? No, I know Jerry has experimented with it a little bit. So Brent, you were saying Vera takes care of most of the heavy lifting with connecting and finding the right RMS and frequency and all that type of stuff. So. Mm-hmm. So it's just there in the software. You click on the gateway you want to attempt to go through, and then it will look after everything. Okay.
Yeah, it'll do the rest. One of those slides it had where you had choices. You know, it'll evaluate the choices and give you almost a percentage chance of having a successful contact. And if you double click on the one you want, then things start happening. You choose the Vera part, and it will do the rest. Now you have to configure Vera and get it working. using a COM port. And sometimes in my case, I have virtual COM ports all set up for all the various things that talk to my 7300. So that part is a bit of a head scratcher. It's not a matter of you can't do it. It's just a matter of how long it takes you to do it. It is doable. And I've proven that even a lunk like me can get that working. So
What did you call yourself?
a lunk.
That's, can I use that, Brent?
Sure. Use it for yourself, but don't use it for me.
Brent, what's the baud rate on HF these days?
These days it can go up. I've seen some connections where I get 200 or 300, 400 or 500 is probably a pretty good day.
Okay. Yeah, I remember back in the day, we did 300, I know.
Yeah.
So you mentioned with Vera about the difference in speed, and Jerry had mentioned this to me as well, the difference between the paid version and the free version. Do you have the paid version or free version? And what would be the difference in?
Yeah, I still have the free version because Taylor is a Scottish name. So I do what I can to minimize my expenses. Although once I get to use Vera more often myself, and if I become more integrated with it into my life, I will probably spring for the paid version. Like I said, I think it's around $60 US. And I believe there are discounts for bulk purchases. You might save, 10 or 20%. I don't know for sure on that. But the speed differences, it's about 2 to 1, I think. So the basic version gets you a maximum of 150 baud, and maybe the paid version has 500 theoretically, or even more than that. One of the challenges is Neil, V1YX. He has decided, for reasons of his own, which makes sense, that he will only allow people to connect to him who are using the higher speed version, the paid version, because otherwise his station is on just too long to handle traffic from stations that are running the slow version. And he's not the one who made it slow. It was made slow by the developer. So he's just trying to maximize his ability to pass traffic in the most efficient amount of time possible, with the least amount of RF and the least amount of key downtime and all that. So it makes sense that he would want to mandate that, but it did take a lot of us freeloaders out of the marketplace for him. But I connect through Newfoundland. There's a station there that doesn't mind that I'm on the cheapo version, and it works great.
What type of power do you usually run to connect into Newfoundland?
I run about 50 watts. My radio will do 100, but I know I don't want to have it on too long. There's lots of keying and unkeying. That thing you heard in the sound effect there, it'll typically sound like that. It'll be like boop, and then it'll go boop, and they'll handshake and exchange a few times. And then once you have a link, you might transmit for maybe 10 or 15 seconds steady, and then it'll drop. So I don't think I'm stressing my radio out too much by running 50 watts, but if you were more bold than that and you wanted to run it for longer, you're probably fine, or higher.
Okay. Any other questions for Brent? Super. Well, that was a good presentation. It certainly piqued my interest with it. I know Jerry talking about it kind of made me a little curious about it. I did look up a couple of YouTube videos a couple times on it, but yeah, I'll certainly going to give it a good look. So thanks for that, and I appreciate you doing that.
My pleasure. Thanks for being such a good and patient audience.
Thanks, Brent. That was good, man.
Thanks, Murray.
Thank you.